We're going to open the floor now for questions from the co-chairs, Ruben Van Lahad and Congresswoman Cynthia McCain.
One could argue that the name of the group, the Coalition to Combat Police Terrorism, is a challenging name, perhaps a slightly incendiary name.
Oh, let me answer that.
And let me finish my question. And there's been criticism that anger in the community fueled the killing of the 2 police officers in New York. Do you have a responsibility to exercise restraint in terms of that kind of rhetoric?
No. Let me be very clear. That's why we share a coalition here. You see, I'm going to say what's true, whether you like it or not, or whether you think it's combative or not. First of all, the United States uses war terms in almost every policy that it implements, domestic and foreign. What's the war on terror? What's the war on drugs? What's the war on crime? What's the war on poverty? War is a slightly belligerent term. Would you agree? So the use of terms, to combat, means that, to combat. We're not here to determine other people's political agenda. We're not here to tell other people how to think. We don't represent the politics of the Gardner family. We don't represent the politics of the Brown family. They're in grief. They lost their child. It launched a movement. Yes, they are not our political leaders. This coalition says what it is, to combat police terrorism, because the police are terrorizing us and have been terrorizing us for what, about 400 years now? They're the descendants of the patty rollers. Remember them from New York? They're the descendants of the Ku Klux Klan. They're the descendants of the militias that used to go hunt slaves and run them down. That's what the police, that's how they police our community. Huh? If you think that that history is not worthy of the term combat, then you need to be 12 years a slave. So yes, we don't have no obligation to tone down our rhetoric. Who do we have an obligation to? CNN? To you? To white folks? Do we have an obligation in this society as the victims of white supremacy in this country to reform white supremacy? Do we have an obligation to make you feel better about yourself and better about your country? No. The coalition is to combat police terrorism.
Do you think there are any police officers out there who are honorable people who do a good job, who maybe deserve to be not?
I think that if our decentralization program comes through, they'll be living in our community. We know that there's black police officers who are terrified by their colleagues. We know that there are black police officers who cannot police properly because of white supremacy, institutional white supremacy inside of their organization. So that we hope that if we can change the laws that allow the police, that allow the community to control policing in their community, that has residency clauses at least for 3 or 4 years of a police's term, that he live in the community that he work in. I'm sure that there are black police officers out there, there are white police officers out there from every denomination who will protect their community, who will enforce the law, and who will protect the defenseless from those amongst their ranks who would make them victims. Yes, I do believe there are those types of policemen.
Does this type of rhetoric endanger them?
Well, they endangered species already, because we know the individual cannot change an institution. Talk to the average black cop and what he tells you when he's off duty and he has to wear his gun. He's terrified, he's scared to death. That a white cop might shoot him because he thinks he's another Negro with a gun. Okay, so let's be real.
I think while I appreciate the question, I really understand that you are trying to turn us into the bad guys. And we're not the bad guys. We are here for the people. Actually, unfortunately, I grew up with a father who was a police officer. And my father would come home angry because yet another black man, back then in the day, they would handcuff them to the telephone pole, and then they would beat them with their nightsticks. And my father had to witness that day in and day out. And as a police officer, a black police officer, who was actually unwanted on the force, he had to swallow that. Eventually, he had his fill, and he couldn't swallow it anymore. You could say that my father also couldn't breathe. And so he left the Atlanta Police Department. Instead of asking other people to change the policy. He said the only way we're going to change this policy is for us to become the policy makers.